What's up, guys? I'm Nick, this is Harley, and today we're going to be discussing the concept of whether or not you, me, Harley, and everybody else out there lives in a simulation.
So there's a lot of complexity to this idea that we're in a simulation, but it's basically the idea that everything in the universe, everything that's happening every second, you and me, we're all inside of a computer or even multiple computers, multiple simulations, by eventually a society that's much more advanced than we are. But it's actually not that much more advanced if you actually think about it, because some futurologists have suggested that we could reach this level of technological capability in just like 40 years. So it's not actually as far as you may think. So Nick, what are some ideas about whether we are or are not in a simulation?
Well, this is a question I've found myself pondering quite a lot, and one of the most prominent philosophers that I find myself continually agreeing with is the Swedish-born philosopher Nick Bostrom. My apologies. His concept of the simulation paradox dictates that there can be one of three mutually exclusive events that have to be the solution to the paradox. The first event being that almost all civilizations at our level eventually reach a level of technological maturity to where they can develop some sort of simulation. The second being that almost all civilizations and societies reach a level of technological maturity to where they can create a simulation. However, there's no need for it, they get bored, they find no reason to maintain the simulation. Or three, that almost all simulations have some sort of fate or predetermined will that's going to be imposed where they're extinct before they reach a level of technological maturity to create a simulation.
So those are some very interesting scenarios about what we could be in right now. But some arguments against the simulation, one of them is by the physicist Frank Wilczek, who he has argued that the universe, if you just think about it, from the quarks, the atoms, photons, neutrinos, all the way up to galaxies, nebulas, it's so complex, there's so much to it, there's so much data, there's so much everything, that it would almost be too complex to be in a simulation. So if you think about it, why would a society build a simulation that's so complex if they didn't have to? So much of this complexity is just completely wasted on things that are so complex that we don't understand. So why would that be the case?
Speaking of things we don't understand, I think this ties back really well into something we've been discussing in class the past week or so, surrounding the concept of dark energy and dark matter. Now, in short, supposedly dark matter and dark energy is the force that is keeping universes and galaxy clusters together. As they rotate, the conservation of momentum dictates those further out from the center of rotation are going to be spinning faster, and therefore theoretically would get launched off into space. However, there are things like dark matter which don't interact with any other light detectable photon or any other energy source, yet are somehow gravitationally holding together the very fabric of the universe. Why would a future society create a simulation in which we have these things that are fundamental yet ununderstandable?
And like you said, since dark matter doesn't emit light, that's something interesting to consider, because the idea of the speed of light is something that could prove that we are in a simulation. If you think about it, speed of light is a lot like a hardware artifact. So if you think about it, space in general is just a variable. It could be a variable in a simulation. And if we're in a simulation, something is running it, something which has a speed, like a processor in a computer. And so if we're thinking about the speed of light, that is very synonymous to a processing speed. So if you think about how far, and the fact that light travels 300 million meters per second for everyone on the Earth, that could be proof that we're living in a simulation which is run by a processor which travels that fast. So these are some interesting ideas, but what do you think, Nick? Now that we'll get subjective, what do you think?
Well, personally, coming from a very religious household, I was born and raised Catholic, went to private Catholic school for most of my life. I like to think that we're all created by God or some higher being, not necessarily God himself, but some higher power. Yet, upon saying that, it really strikes me as similar to the entire conversation we've just been having, as the higher power in this instance would be the technologically mature civilization. I would personally like to believe that every life is a gift. The world we're given is a gift, and we're created in God's image and likeness. However, I don't necessarily think we can discount the alternative either. But what I choose to believe is we're all from God.
That's interesting. I sort of agree, because I don't think a simulation makes much sense, in the sense that what purpose would a society have to make a simulation? It would be lots of hard work. And if you just think about how much, in general, just how much data, how much code it would take, it's kind of crazy to think about. If you just think about everyone on Earth, there's 8 billion people who are all thinking something all the time, their mind is working, so many thoughts. That's not even counting all the other life on Earth, and then all the other life potentially in the universe. There's so much to think about, that the fact that the simulation would just be so complex, so much, that I don't think it's possible. But even if we do live in a simulation, does that actually matter for us?
Well, it's a very good point. When you phrase it like that, if we were to discover that we're all just ones and zeros, would that really be any different than when we fundamentally discovered elements, or the fact that we're all just made of atoms and quarks?
It's interesting.
And if nothing really matters, then does this conversation we just had matter?